glad to have you with us today. We're counting down to our next bar exam, which right now is a little under 100 days away. This is certainly a bellwether point for a lot of people. I know some of you are still in school, and at this stage, you're probably just getting ready for your finals. So to you, the bar is still perhaps just an event, but many of you have begun your studies already, and that's great news, and we certainly encourage that. Now, 100 days until the bar, to some people, seems like a very short period of time. In other words, it feels like the exam is going to be right on top of you. But I think for most people, 100 days, when we think about bar exam days, is still a very long time. And it's what I've often described as the dog days of bar review. It's kind of hard to get motivated for a lot of people right now. It's still really too far away for most people to feel really focused on it, and yet you're not really comfortable and to take it as seriously probably as you ought to, but you want to do something still. And so for most people, you want to be starting now, working a little bit in order to get the most benefit from the work that you're going to be doing as you lead up to the test. Obviously, if you're in our course, I want to encourage you to follow your assignments and the time that we give you and suggest that you spend on each assignment. It's definitely an advantage over those people that don't start studying until much, much later. And the net benefit is that it keeps you moving through this kind of still period of time without spending too long on any one subject. At about 100 days until the exam, results start to come in from previous exams, and we've done a lot of things to help bring you up to speed on that. We've got a podcast that comes out once a week where we talk about those results, and you can find those links on celebrationbarreview.com. In addition to that, I try to interview some successful bar exam takers after every exam. We're doing that right now. And we've got those interviews on our site if you look under case studies. And I think these are really great stories for you to watch and see what people are talking about and what their experience has been. When you see that, it should be encouraging to everyone because some of the successes that people have and in the face of the difficulties that they've got are absolutely extraordinary. One of the things that happens when results begin to come in, I talk to people who took other bar reviews or studied on their own and they didn't pass their exams. So they're contacting us for assistance. And in a way, that's always kind of sad because for the most part, I find that the people that I talk to in that situation generally worked very hard. They studied hard, they seem like they're really bright people, and they made a good effort. And frankly, most of them would say that they're baffled by why they didn't pass the test. And of course, if you haven't been keeping up, you may not be aware that there are more repeat bar takers than there are first-time bar takers. So this is not uncommon at all. The most common reason that I find why people don't pass the exam is not that they didn't study hard enough or they aren't smart enough. It's that they had a model or a paradigm of the exam that's in their head in terms of what the test was measuring, what it was evaluating, what the examiners were testing them on, and that paradigm or model was inaccurate. By saying that, I don't mean that it was inaccurate with respect to the substantive law. Truth is, most all of us in the bar review industry teach basically the same substantive law. We may have different approaches to it, but we teach the same rules. The problem here is that people who failed typically have a paradigm that just doesn't work in the real world of the bar exam. And here's the paradigm. The people who don't pass seem to believe that the bar exam is a test of how much law they can memorize and recite. In other words, they say, I'm going to memorize all the elements and all the rules, and then I'll just spit them back like I did in law school. For a minority of people, that approach is okay, it works, and some people pass, but not the majority of bar takers. So for the majority of bar takers, it's not enough to just memorize and recite rules. And because we don't emphasize memorization or recitation and cramming, we have for many years now consistently been better than the state pass rate averages, even though we work with more repeat bar takers than first-time takers. And it's because we approach the exam from a different perspective. Now, to try and illustrate that for you in maybe a more practical way, I want to use a somewhat embarrassing personal circumstance just to show how you can get locked into a certain way of thinking and then lose sight on some other plausible explanations that are quite rational and that could turn out to be true. So here's my situation. I've been married to a very wise, lovely woman for now over 40 years. She's very smart. She's very talented. She actually runs our business administratively, as well as handling the household and doing a whole lot of other things that keep her very busy. And that's why, if you're in our course, you rarely see or hear from her, because she's doing all the things that make it possible for me to get in front of the camera and do stuff like this. In any event, For many years, I had noticed, but never commented, that whenever the toilet paper was getting down near the end, she would put out a new roll of toilet paper in the bathroom, but never changed the old roll. I've assumed, as all good husbands do over a long period of time, to just keep my mouth shut. And even though I kept my mouth shut, it didn't mean I wasn't thinking about it periodically, and I've built my own plausible set of reasons for why this behavior of hers occurs. Because you have to understand, my wife is a very rational person, and I can't imagine why in the world she wouldn't change toilet paper roll. I thought in my own mind, it's probably because she doesn't want to chip her nails, or she doesn't want to deal with that crazy device that pops out at you from the toilet paper holder, or whatever, and therefore she's just being nice by putting out the next toilet paper roll. It's her way of telling me, as longtime married couples tend to do, without the use of words, to change the toilet paper. I have taken that approach for years and years. Perhaps some of you can relate to this. And I had quite innocently assumed that's what was going on, and it wasn't really worth commenting on. It was pretty trivial. I'm not sure exactly what it was that caused us to have the conversation one day, but somehow I guess I walked into the bathroom, saw the toilet paper roll, saw the new one right next to the old one, and started to put it on the holder. And I think I said something to myself, thinking I was actually talking to myself, but probably speaking out loud. And I said, why does she never change this? And my wife overheard me. And she stopped and she said, excuse me, what did you just say? And, I was trapped. And in the way that husbands do when they're trapped, you've got to actually say something. So I said, well, dear, it looks to me like you never changed the toilet paper roll. And she looked at me and said, you are such an idiot. I don't change the toilet paper because there's still paper on the roll. I use it all the way to the end, and I put out the new roll so that no one will be inconvenienced. I change plenty of toilet paper rolls, and you just don't notice. Hard to admit it in public, but she was right. I had this totally incorrect perception of why something was happening, and I believed it. My behavior, everything I did with respect to the toilet paper and the roll was built on the assumption that what was happening was this idea that she just didn't want to change it. But in fact, that wasn't what was happening at all. Once my wife explained to me what she was doing, it of course made perfect sense, and I apologized profusely and tried to extricate myself from the mess I had made. You understand how that goes. What I realized was that she doesn't like to waste anything. Toilet paper wouldn't be different than anything else. It made perfect sense. All right. My point is that in the bar review, that people get similar, weird, misguided notions about what's going on, and then, like me, they act in accordance with those beliefs. So one of the big misbeliefs is I've got to learn everything to pass. And in order to learn everything, I have to memorize everything because that's how you learn. But let me just ask, if that were not correct, if it were not true that you don't have to learn everything and you don't have to memorize to learn anything, would it change the way you'd study? If you honestly think about that question, the only way you could answer would be to say, absolutely it would. If that were true, I would do everything completely differently. One of the big tasks that we're faced with in our course is getting people who've signed up with us and who are in the course to begin to refocus and change their paradigm. If you've been in our webinar where we talk about how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam, I spend a good deal of time talking about this particular subject. But if you haven't seen it, I'll just say this. When you start to rethink the way that your paradigm is set up, it changes everything. If you begin to think about what studying for the test would mean from the standpoint of the examiner, I think the question is, what do I want to know about a potential applicant? Would my primary criteria be how well this applicant can memorize and recite the law? Doesn't seem likely. Or would it rather be, how well can this applicant use the law or make arguments? How well can they identify distinguishing characteristics of certain principles of law? How well can they solve problems? Isn't that really the task of lawyers today? Not just being robotic in memorizing and reciting. If you answer that question the way that the obvious evidence would lead you to, plausibly and realistically, you would say, wow, that's completely different. So why am I spending my time making flashcards and creating outlines and doing all sorts of things to memorize if that's not really the skill that's being tested? So my message to you as we head into this 100-day mark until the bar exam is to re-examine your assumptions. If your assumptions have not been productive for you up to this point, then rethink them. Consider them from a new point of view. If this is your first time taking the bar, or perhaps you're someone who took the bar many years ago and you're trying to remember what your assumptions were back, then start with a fresh sheet of paper or a fresh roll of toilet paper and rethink what it is that's going on in the test. I assure you that when you do that, it'll change the way you study and it will change it for the better. I encourage all of you to rethink those assumptions, go back at it, and see if you can come up with a different approach. And if you want to know more about our approach, just check the page below here and click to find out more. I hope you have a great week of study, and for everybody, don't forget to change the toilet paper when the roll runs out. We'll be back again next week.